We know how this person walks, we know how they talk, so this crime should have been so much easier to solve than it's proven to be. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please do subscribe, and if you're old here, hello again. My name's Kate Philpott. This is Sandy beside me. Don't think you can see her right now, but she'll probably pop her head up at some point. And I cover true crime cases on my channel. In today's video, we'll be covering a very highly requested case, the Delphi murders. I put a poll up on YouTube last week asking if I should cover this case because it has gotten a lot of coverage, and most people still did want to see a video on it. And I'll be totally honest, I had heard of this case before, but it was years since I'd actually read anything about it, so I couldn't even remember if it was solved, if it was unsolved. But now that I've seen that it is still unsolved, I just had to talk about it. There's still a killer out there who hasn't been held accountable for this horrific crime. Quick little disclaimer though before we get into it, I don't claim to be an expert in any of the cases I cover. Everything I mention is just what I found online and merged into the one video, and obviously, no disrespect to anybody I speak about, especially if there are details that are inaccurate or missing. Alright guys, let's get into it. This is the case of Abigail Williams, aka Abby, and Liberty German, aka Libby. To understand the dynamic of this case, I think it's really important to actually look at the area that this took place in. So it all happened in a small town called Delphi in Indiana. And when I say small town, I mean it was really small. At the time of the murders, there were less than 3,000 people living there. And it was the definition of the kind of place where people would leave their doors unlocked, they would let kids out unsupervised. Unfortunately, the fact of the matter is you should always have systems in place to keep you safe. And I guess expect the unexpected, as pessimistic as that might sound. But let's just chat about the girls for a moment. So Abby was 13 and Libby was 14. And they were actually total opposites. So their personalities really complemented each other. Abby was a lot more shy and reserved, kind of kept to herself a bit more, whereas Libby was a lot more outgoing. She loved people and she was very extroverted. They both took part in a ton of extracurricular activities, things like sports, the school band, even photography they were interested in, and they were both very creative and very close with their families. Alright, so let's take it right up to the date of the 13th of February 2017. Abby had slept over in Libby's house the night before, so that morning they had breakfast together and they wanted to do something fun that day because they actually had a day off school. So Libby asked her older sister Kelsey if they could go to the Manon High Bridge, which I will talk a little bit about in a second. But initially Kelsey said no because she had plans that day already. She was going meeting up with her boyfriend, her day was already pretty busy. But then she thought, you know what, actually, I've been saying no to Libby quite a lot, so sure, I'll drop him off there. And that's exactly what happened. At about 1:35 p.m, Kelsey dropped off Abby and Libby in this hiking area. On the way there, they all sang 21 Pilots, just enjoying the car journey, enjoying the freedom. And as her sister Libby walked away, she told her that she loved her. This was without realizing that this would be the last time she would ever see her sister and Abby alive. So this spot was very much out in nature. There was a creek below this bridge called Deer Creek, and there were a lot of trees and hills, and it was absolutely beautiful. Everyone who's been there speaks so highly about the place itself, that it's just so peaceful and you're out in nature and it's gorgeous. One of its defining factors though was the Manon High Bridge, and it was this huge old train track bridge. Definitely not used for trains anymore. It was basically abandoned, but it just was the remnants of what used to be a train track bridge. And the bridge itself was kind of worn down and definitely not the safest. And the plan wasn't for them to spend all day there or anything like that. They were really just going to spend an hour or two. And at 3:15 p.m, Libby's dad Derek was planning on collecting them. So when that time came around, Derek showed up to the agreed spot and he tried to call Libby, but she wouldn't answer her phone. He called her multiple times, he waited a little bit, he called her again, but there was no answer. And about 15 minutes later, when he still had no answer from Libby, that's when he started to call the rest of the family and asking if anybody had seen or heard from her, but nobody had. Several family members started to make their way there. They started searching for the girls. They all were trying to call them on their phones, but no answers. And there was just no sign of them anywhere. It was just like instantly they just disappeared. Obviously Abby's family were contacted as well, but the minutes turned into hours and there still was no sign of the girls. At about 5:30 p.m. the girls were officially reported missing, and after that the word spread like wildfire. There were search parties from the whole community, from even other communities, people driving in. Everybody wanted to help, and I suppose that is the benefit of having such a small, tight-knit community in Delphi. Everybody either knew these girls or knew of them or knew their names, and even if they didn't know them, they just thought, well, they're one of our own, or they're two of our own, you know, we have to look after them. And these girls were not troublemakers. They were not the type to pull some prank on everybody and be like, ha ha ha, they can't find us. And they weren't the type to run away. So the only way that this would really make sense is if something had gone horribly wrong, which could mean a nasty fall of some sort, or they got lost and lost their phones or something like that, or maybe something even more sinister. But what also happened around this time as the hours were passing was some people came forward and noticed that Libby had posted something on her Snapchat story at about 2:07 p.m. and it was a picture of Abby standing on the Manon High Bridge. But at around midnight, the searchers were called off. They really didn't want anybody to get hurt out searching. I mean, this was fairly rough terrain. Like I said, it was very hilly and there were trails, yes, but if you veered off the trails, it got even more rough and there was no lights, and then, you know, it was a very difficult area to be searching in. And if somebody else injured themselves while out searching, then they would have to use up even more resources. So they just decided it would be best to call off the searches at that point. But they called off the searches and then they said they would pick it back up in the morning. Also, pretty early on in the case, the authorities were saying there's no need to worry about foul play, this is nothing like that. And I find that very strange. Like, these are two, like a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old. Sure, sometimes kids run away, but it just didn't really make sense. And another reason I find it a bit strange that they didn't suspect foul play at the start was because, okay, yes, it was out in broad daylight, but it's not like it was in the middle of a busy street or anything like that. Like, it was still a fairly protected environment, and it was still somewhat hidden out in nature. Either way, police also couldn't track the girls' phones. They pretty much turned off as soon as they went missing. But moving on to the next morning, it actually was not the best morning for searches. It was quite foggy, so the conditions were not the best. And because of this, the searches actually didn't start until about 10 a.m. But at this point, there were 300 volunteers, there were helicopters, there were kayakers, everybody just flooded to this area to try and help out. And they were just a couple hours into the search on this day, and someone shouted up the hill that they'd found a shoe. The shoe was a black Nike, and when Kelsey saw this shoe, or when she heard that it was a black Nike, she knew instantly that that was Libby's shoe because she had dropped them off. She knew exactly what they were wearing. She knew that Libby was wearing black Nikes. And only about 30 seconds later, the bodies of Abby and Libby were found. They were found in a ravine filled with leaves, and it was about half a mile away from the Manon High Bridge, so it's not like it was directly beside it. There was actually a fair bit of distance between where they were last seen, for example, on Libby's Snapchat story on the Manon High Bridge, and where they were found. And they were also found on the edge of a private property. And the man who owned this private property was looked into fairly heavily, but in all honesty, it really does seem like he was a victim of circumstance. But even still, apparently the crime scene itself was brutal and gruesome. And we don't have many details on it. I will get into that in a little bit. But what we do know is this crime scene was absolutely massive, because essentially the crime scene stretched all the way from where the girls were last seen on the bridge, half a mile away, to this ravine. And as you can imagine, when you go through a crime scene, you could be looking for something as small as a strand of hair. That was going to be a massive, massive search. And as you can imagine, there was a pretty intense media frenzy, and this became fairly high profile. It was such a place where people felt safe, and you probably felt like you could go out on your own and not have to worry about your safety. So that made this whole thing even more jarring. The police then held a press conference, and something that they said, which was pretty unusual, although I kind of understand where they're coming from, was they were asked, was there a threat to the community? And they straight up said no. So I do understand, they wouldn't want to panic the community. They wouldn't want people to freak out, because that could cause even more accidents. But surely, since you know that there is a killer out there, that you might want people to be a bit more vigilant. I don't know, it's a pretty tough balance to find, I'm sure, and I certainly wouldn't want to be in those shoes and leading people through something like that. Okay, so I'm gonna talk a tiny little bit about the autopsy, because I'm pretty sure you're wondering about the finer details of the crime and the crime scene and the causes of death and everything like that. But honestly, all we know is that it was a double homicide. Everything else, like cause of death, whether they fought back or not, and all those, finer details are all private. They have not been released to the public. And that's one thing authorities have really prioritized in this case, is keeping everything totally under the radar, totally tight-lipped. And although it is frustrating as an observer of a case, particularly when you want to help, that can be very beneficial. I mean, look at the Suzanne Morphew case. We knew very little about the investigation and everything that was going on, and just a month or two ago now, they have charged Barry Morphew with her murder. Very interesting case. I'll have that linked up in the cards if you haven't seen that yet. So moving on to the 15th of February. So this is 2 days after the girls went missing and the day after their bodies were found. Authorities released a photo. This photo was a still image from a video that Libby had taken on her phone while they were on the bridge that day, which is incredible. I mean, when does that ever happen? Libby had recorded this video, but she didn't post it. She actually saved it onto her phone. And at the very beginning, this man was not a suspect, but the police were just like, who's this guy? We want to speak to him. Maybe he saw something, like as a potential witness. So this was shared a lot online, and everyone was trying to find out who this guy was. But the thing was, the picture was really blurry. And yes, you could see the whole structure or stature of this guy, but you couldn't see his face. You couldn't really make out who he was. All you could really see was that he was most likely a white male. He was wearing blue jeans, a blue coat, a hoodie, and he had his hands in his pockets and he was looking down. And it's so frustrating, because in such a small town, you would imagine that someone would recognize him, but he has never come forward and never been identified. And that in itself just makes him even more suspicious, because everyone in this area knew about this case, about these girls being killed. It was massive news for such a small town. Let's just think about reasons why this person would potentially not come forward. Number one, maybe he hadn't heard about it. Pretty unlikely. Number two, maybe he was genuinely an innocent bystander and just didn't want to look guilty because he would have been the last one to see the girls alive, which unfortunately people can be scrutinized for, and maybe he didn't want to be wrongly accused of something. Or lastly, he was the guy. He was the killer. As you can imagine, the majority of people believe that the latter is the case, that this was the man who killed the girls. And the police actually believe that Libby took this video, or these videos, because I do believe that there are more that we haven't seen yet, on purpose, and that they knew that something was off about this guy, so almost in an attempt to catch their own killer. The girls were also into true crime, which is very interesting, because it just goes to show, as much as it might be, as bad as it sounds, like lighthearted for you to watch, it genuinely has actual benefits in the real life. Like, I personally know a lot more than the average person in my community about like safety and what kind of behavior is suspicious in someone and all this kind of stuff. And it really does seem like the girls were smart enough to use this kind of knowledge to their advantage. And there is a lot of speculation on whether the girls took these videos on purpose or not, but the general consensus is that they did. Like, they were going out of their way to have evidence for whoever needed it. Which to me just shows how much terror they were probably experiencing in those last moments of their lives. And also, even a side note from that, you can't, well, it's pretty unlikely that this person was able to kill two girls simultaneously. So the chances are one of them experienced and witnessed the murder of the other, all the while knowing that that was most likely their fate as well, which is such a terrifying thought. But also, I will just say, obviously, this guy is totally unidentified, but people did start calling him Bridge Guy, so I will refer to him as such from now on. Okay, so let's talk about the investigation a little bit. Luckily, with this case, the FBI were involved from a very early point, and they were asking the public to think about this day and think about if anybody had, cancelled plans with them or come up with a reasonable sounding yet possibly fake excuse to buy themselves some time on this day, on the 13th of February. And they were also asking people to think about if there was anybody around them that had changed their appearance in any way, shaved a beard or got a different hairstyle, changed the way they dressed, or even behavioral changes like starting to abuse drugs or alcohol, or getting very nervous or irritable, or potentially followed the case a little bit too much. So the public were just asked to remain vigilant and really think about these things. But moving on to the 22nd of February, new information was released. It was actually an audio file from the video that Libby had taken on her phone. It's pretty low quality audio, but you can hear the man saying 3 words: down the hill. Downhill. 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 So this is pretty incredible now, because we've got a vague idea of how this man kinda looks, and we now know how he sounds. And they really wanted to just spread this voice as far as physically possible. But the fact that they had his voice just increases the chances of someone recognizing it a lot, because as we know, you can recognize someone's voice. Look at last week's video, or the last video I put out, where little James recognized Bob Greenwald's voice. If you haven't seen that one, I definitely recommend checking it out if you want your mind blown. Like blown to pieces. A lot of very intense ideas in that one. It'll be up in the cards, but moving on. But with this audio being released, it really sparks up a lot of ideas in your head. First of all, who is this man? Was he known to Abby and Libby? Was he a total stranger? Did he know that they were going to be there? Did he somehow see the Snapchat story that Libby put up and made his way there? The picture of Abby was posted at 2:07 p.m. and already by 3:15 p.m. something had already gone wrong. And it doesn't seem to be clear if Libby's Snapchat story was public or private, but the chances are it probably would just be her peers that would see it. But even still, maybe this person was someone's dad and he was checking his son or daughter's phone, monitoring it, because these kids were quite young, 13, 14-year-olds. Or maybe it came up in conversation like, oh, hey, that's so cool. These girls I know are at the Manon High Bridge right now. Look what they just posted. And then this guy took it and ran with it. Now, that might be a very oddly specific example, but I definitely think it's worth giving the time to these kind of things, because something specific happened. There is a solution out there. Something happened on that February afternoon. It just hasn't come into our experience or our awareness yet. But there are just so many clues that could just break this case wide open. According to certain police officers that were at the scene itself was odd. And there was also apparently a lot of physical evidence at the scene. Again, these details have been kept private, but from what has been disclosed though, it seems that they do have DNA of some sort and they do have fingerprints of some sort, but they don't know if this DNA or these fingerprints actually belong to the killer. Also, something to bear in mind is the spot that the girls were killed wasn't exactly a tourist spot. Only the locals really knew about it, which kind of led police to believe that this man was a local and that he knew the area pretty well. And Kelsey, Libby's sister, believes that the killer knew the area well enough to know that where Abby and Libby were standing was a very vulnerable place, because they were on the side of the bridge where there wasn't really much you could do. You could only really get to the bridge from the opposite side. So Kelsey believes that this man knew that they were essentially trapped there with nowhere to go on that other side of the bridge. And what also really boggles my mind is, how did this guy get there? How did he get away? I mean, Libby and Kelsey's dad was already there at 3:15, so it must have been fairly soon after something had happened. So did this guy commit the crime, hide the bodies, and escape really quick? Or did he somehow hide there for a while and maybe even participate in the searches that evening and then just leave with everybody else, not looking like he was the dodgy one? Or maybe even he left and then came back to join in the search to show his face and look like a friendly helper, you know? Did he walk there? Did he drive there? If he drove there, was his car there when other people started arriving? Did he leave? So many questions about the logistics of how that all played out. And also, was this guy originally there because he was just an outdoorsy person? Like, did he love nature? Did he love hiking? These kind of things would be actually quite helpful to know about this guy, because they could be really strong interests of someone that knows him. Like, you'd be like, oh, so-and-so's always out hiking. He loves that area. You know, like, there's a good chance that this guy knew this route very well, because it seemed that he hid the bodies fairly well, considering the fact that there were hundreds of people out searching for the girls and it took hours. Well, it took till the next day to find them. He may have known the area well enough to know what specific parts were too difficult to go or that would take people longer to find them. And maybe he did this to buy himself some time. What's also a very confusing aspect is Abby and Libby's bodies were found on the opposite side of the bridge and half a mile away to where the picture of Abby was posted. So did the killer make them walk to this new location? Did he carry them? It seems pretty unlikely that he'd be able to carry both of them, whether they were alive or dead at that point. And I mean, it's probably pretty important to mention at this point that Libby alone was approximately 200 pounds, which would have made that even more difficult. And then, of course, as I'm talking this out, I'm like, well, it does make sense for him to maybe instruct them to go somewhere, because we have the audio clip saying down the hill. Maybe he had a weapon to intimidate them, maybe, you know, a gun or a knife or something, and threatened them with it and said, down the hill. I don't know, that definitely seems more likely to me, that he actually had some method of intimidation that would get them to comply with whatever he said. And then I'm also thinking, was it a planned attack or was it a crime of opportunity? I definitely would like to know your thoughts on that, so let me know in the comments. So a few months later, in July 2017, authorities released a sketch. This was a very detailed sketch based off the still image from the video that we have, and also based off a number of witness statements of people who had seen a man in the area around that time. But the thing is, sketches are really for a person that already knows the person. This has been a bit of an issue in this case, because people are grabbing this sketch and putting it beside every single white male and trying to find people that look like it. But it's more so for people that see the sketch and instantly think, oh my god, I know exactly who that looks like. But let's just fast forward about 2 years now, okay? We're moving right up to the 19th of April 2019, and Indiana State Police held a press conference. This is a pretty big milestone in this case for a number of reasons. For one, they released a slightly longer version of the audio clip. So previously it was just down the hill. Now it pretty much kind of seems like it sounds like guys down the hill. And I said that in a really weird, like, around the world way, because yes, it does kind of sound like guys down the hill, but it also, it's really not clear. Part of me was thinking, is this just an audio illusion? You know, when you hear a noise and somebody tells you that they're saying this word and then you hear it as that word, even though originally it's not what you heard of it? That doesn't make sense. Let me explain with an example. If you've ever heard of the brainstorm / green needle one, where if you think of the phrase brainstorm, it sounds like brainstorm. If you think of the term green needle, it sounds like green needle. And those are the exact same audio clips. And it's just because your mind is primed to hearing a specific word that you hear it. So maybe it doesn't say guys down the hill. Maybe it's something else. But really, that is just a theory. But again, I would love to know your thoughts. Like, for example, is there anything else that you hear in there, or do you definitely hear guys down the hill? There are also some people that believe that the guys part is a different person's voice to the down the hill part. And while that is possible, authorities do believe that it is just one person's voice and it's simply a shift in tone of voice. But again, definitely let me know what you think. Also at this press conference, they released a 2-second clip from the video that Libby took on her phone. So this is the same video that we previously just had a screenshot from. They released a 2-second clip, and this was in the hope of someone recognizing this man's mannerisms and how he walked. Although they did warn people that Bridge Guy was not walking normally in this clip simply because of the awkward spacing on the bridge itself. But that's another thing we have. That's another potential way for people to recognize. But that's not even all they released at this press conference. They also released a new sketch. And with this sketch, they said that this was the man that they believed is the person responsible for the murders. They believe this person is from Delphi, either currently or previously, or at the very least, he visits regularly or works there. They also believe that the person is between the ages of 18 and 40, or at least was at the time of the murders. And this is a massive age range. They also said that the man probably looks younger than his true age. But can I just say, just the mention of the age 18 kind of shook me a little bit, because this is obviously a lot younger than the previous sketch that they had released, and the new sketch itself looks a lot younger than the previous one. And not only would this mean that the man was younger, but it would also mean he was a lot closer to the girls' ages, which makes me kind of think maybe they knew him from school. Sure, it could kind of be a little bit weird if you're a 13 or a 14-year-old girl friends with an 18-year-old guy, but stranger things have happened. And also it could just be a friend of a friend, or, you know, someone who was showing unusual interest in the girls maybe. What was also fascinating about this press conference though was they spoke directly to the killer.
Directly to the killer, who may be in this room. We believe you are hiding in plain sight. For more than 2 years, you never thought we would shift gears to a different investigative strategy, but we have. We likely have interviewed you or someone close to you. We know that this is about power to you, and you want to know what we know. And one day, you will. A question to you. What will those closest to you think of when they find out that you brutally murdered 2 little girls? 2 children. Only a coward would do such a thing. We are confident that you have told someone what you have done. Or at the very least, they know, because of how different you are since the murders.
Now, there have been a number of experts that have looked at the footage and looked at the audio, and just about the audio, they do say that this man sounds very in control. He doesn't sound like he's overly emotional, excited, nervous, anything like that. He sounds very calm, very in control, but still quite firm. So the lack of emotion might lead you to think that maybe this guy is highly psychopathic. In which case, in their daily life, they could just come off as a totally normal guy and not really stand out at all. Alright, let's just chat a little bit about the persons of interest in this case. Over the years, there have been multiple, but most of them, to be honest, I am gonna kind of brush over relatively quickly. But there has been an update in 2021, just a couple of months ago, basically with a new person of interest, and I'm gonna go into a bit more detail on him. So first of all, we have Daniel Nations. He's a registered sex offender, and in September 2017, he was arrested for threatening strangers on a hiking trail with a hatchet. The thing about Daniel is he looks quite a lot like the sketch. The original sketch, I will say, because it was before the second sketch was actually released that he was kind of thought of as a person of interest. As of 2018 though, he is no longer considered a suspect. Next we have Charles Eldridge. He was arrested in January 2018 in Union City, Indiana. He was arrested for some pretty awful charges regarding children. The main reason he was looked at for the Delphi murders though is because he has a striking resemblance to, again, that original sketch. Again, this was also before the second more important sketch was released, and he really doesn't look like the new one. Next we have Thomas Bruce. Thomas Bruce was arrested with fatally shooting one woman and sexually assaulting 2 others, and he definitely seems to have the same stature, I guess, as Bridge Guy, but he hasn't been officially connected to the murders at all. Finally, let me tell you about the most recent person of interest, James Chadwell. One thing I can tell you about James Chadwell is he is a real piece of shit. On the 19th of April 2021, which, side note, is to the day 2 years exactly after the police released their new sketch and the elongated audio and speaking directly to the killer, which may or may not be significant, but I do just think that's an interesting fact. But basically around 7 p.m. on this day, a 9-year-old girl went missing, and this was in Lafayette, Indiana, which is only about a 25-minute drive south from Delphi. As they started searching for this little girl, they were knocking on doors, and they found themselves knocking on James Chadwell's door. They were asking, "Have you seen this girl?" And he said that she was at his house earlier that day, but he hadn't seen her all evening. They then took that information and moved on. Later on that evening, when there was still no sign of her, they went back to James's house to kind of push a little bit more. And they actually asked if they could search his property, and he said, sure, why not? Now, there was no trace of this 9-year-old girl initially, but then they discovered a locked room in the basement, and it wasn't just locked, it was chained shut. Never felt the need to chain any doors shut personally in my home, but maybe that's just me. But eventually they got into this room and they found the missing girl. She was not clothed, she had multiple very clear injuries on her body, and some of these injuries were bite marks, and they didn't even look like human bite marks, they looked like dog bite marks. What had actually happened was James Chadwell had ordered his dogs to attack this girl. James obviously assaulted her himself as well, and he was mid-attack when the police originally arrived at his door, which is crazy to think about. Now, I do just want to mention for a little sec all of James's tattoos. A lot of tattoos on this guy, which is fine, but there's some of them might tell a story. One of his tattoos is the face of a girl who seems to be crying blood, and I have to be honest, this face looks a lot like Libby German's face. Now, could it be a coincidence? Yes, of course, but is it very unsettling? Yes, of course. And the thing is, James, although he had previously been in prison, he wasn't in prison at the time of the Delphi murders, and his brother claims that he doesn't think James had this tattoo when he got out of prison, basically meaning that it was most likely a recent addition. James himself was also very active on social media platforms and made a bit of a name for himself, making very bitter comments about love and about women.
So, all you chicks on TikTok trying to sling your booty or sling your taco, whatever you're trying to do, you need to wrap that shit up. It's, it ain't working. Nobody, we got porn for that shit. We don't need your little extras. So, take that shit somewhere else. We're looking for a real ass woman. Over the age of 30. And confident.
Also, I do often find it very interesting to see what family members of a person of interest say about them, and James's brother had a lot to say about him. He says that James is an evil person and that he absolutely does think it's possible that James would be capable of a crime like the Delphi murders. James had also tried to drown him when they were kids, the brother being about 4 years old and James being 6 or 7 years old. And James had held his brother's head under the water in the bath. And I'm really fascinated to know what this brother thinks about the voice in the audio clip saying guys down the hill. And also, what does he think about the man walking in the video, Bridge Guy? Does he think that, oh my god, that's definitely him? I just feel like you would know your brother's walk, you would know your brother's voice. So I'd be really interested to see what his thoughts are on that. James's stepfather was also asked if he believed James was capable of a crime like this, and he said absolutely, and that he should never be allowed out and free in the world. He's shown multiple family and friends over the years that he is more than capable of very intense evil stuff. He even shoved his wife so hard in their house that it left an imprint of her body in the drywall. He also had a long history of drinking and violence, which all started when his mother told him that her husband was not his actual father. I mean, I'm not making a joke out of this, but mommy issues are a real thing. Like, that's... James also has a very interesting relationship history. He had often been with a lot of single mothers, all of whom, or at least most of whom, he was very violent towards. But the update on James is that as of April 2021, he is being looked at as a person of interest in the Delphi murders, and at the moment he is in prison for assaulting that 9-year-old girl. I think that'll be really interesting to see how that all unfolds. So looking at this case as a whole, I think it's incredibly frustrating because we know how this person walks, we know how they talk. The girls were out in broad daylight and they were together. So this crime, A, shouldn't have happened at all, and B, should have been so much easier to solve than it's proven to be. With all that said though, authorities and a lot of the public do believe that it is absolutely solvable and that there will be justice in this case. It is very much still an active, ongoing case, and even up to this year they've still been getting search warrants, they've still been investigating tips, and obviously they even have a new person of interest. What we don't have, at least publicly, is any real motive. Like, why? Why did this person do this? And obviously, you know, the answer to that question might just lie in the finer details of the crime scene, the details that aren't yet public. And so many people there are just traumatized by what happened, and also traumatized by the fact that the killer is still at large. So obviously, if you live in and around that area and you think you saw something or you think you know something, do not hesitate to contact the authorities. It's not too late. They have an anonymous tip line, so it doesn't even have to impact your safety. And other than that, feel free to let me know what your thoughts are on this case in the comments. Is there anything that sticks out to you as particularly odd? Are there any theories that really stick with you that you can't help but have a gut feeling about? And do you think they're on the right track with this James Chadwell guy? Let's have a little discussion about it in the comments. We also have more in-depth discussions on the Patreon if you want to be involved in that. And of course, massive shout out to the patrons that we already have for this channel. But thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like. That really helps me out, helps me get the word out for these cases, helps me spread the word of the channel a lot more. And make sure you're subscribed as well and you hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Of course as well, don't forget to follow me over on TikTok, Instagram and Twitter, all of which is katephilpott_YT. But again, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!